Okay, so this is going to be interesting. This is our first foray into Filipino horror movies, and it's notorious for being really subpar. But you know what they say: never judge a movie by its title, no matter how bland it is. So Third Eye is written and directed by Eloy Adlawan, stars Carla Abellana, EJ Falcon, Camille Prats, and Denise Laurel. And Third Eye centers around this character played by Carla Abellana, who as a kid had her third eye opened, and it was closed again by her grandmother, but then that grandmother died, her third eye opened again, and she becomes kind of involved in this thing where she suspects her husband slash boyfriend, I forgot which, uh, seems to be having an affair with this other woman, and she follows them to like this strange mountain province, and they discover this tribe of pretty much cannibals, and from then on it's just this crazy, crazy trip. Now again, Pinoy horror has a reputation for not being that good, and mostly because of budget concerns. Many horror movies rely on CGI nowadays at least, and we just don't have that kind of technology here. Which is strange because, you can use practical effects. It's just that I feel like the people who work in the horror industry here, they don't necessarily have budget either for their practical effects, and, that's not exactly a big thing in our country, horror movies and stuff. It's a very niche thing. Thus, I don't think lots of people can really commit to the horror scene. I don't know, it's just me. However, ultimately, Third Eye was actually an okay movie, and that's partially because it's not really a straight up horror movie. It really is more of like a drama thriller kind of thing. It has horror elements, definitely, so I guess it's still a horror movie, but anyway, let's get into it. So Third Eye is an extremely small movie. You can really tell. It's not an independent film though, but even here, non-independent films still have really small budgets. And you can really tell because this movie doesn't really go out to huge places with, really elaborate setups. The production designers really do what they can with the houses and whatnot, but what really saves this movie is its cinematography. Surprisingly, the cinematography was able to show different views and aspects of the town they end up in through use of lighting. Lighting and inventive angles, just really, strategic use of the camera really did kind of save this movie from feeling cheap. And really is a credit to Aloy Adlawan, who actually does a really good job directing this, that he really recognized what this movie was, that it's a very small film, and that it is very much about, he didn't really focus too much on the horror aspect. In fact, the third eye in the title, it's not really there in the story, it's why the title is kind of misleading. But he really did manage to keep it engaging. For the most part, this movie does chug along very fast, and really feels like you're constantly moving. And I actually thought Third Eye was written well. The characters are very surprisingly set up well, so that when later on the thriller aspect comes in, it actually is quite surprising. The character Carla Abellana plays, you can tell she obviously suffers from this, trauma of having this third eye around. Camille Prats plays like one of the cannibal ladies or whatever, and she's good also in it. Denise Laurel, who plays the other woman, is also good. But I really am a fan of how close this movie gets to being like this overblown drama. But it does set up the story enough for you to care without it becoming too weepy, and then just dives straight into the whole thriller thing. And it's great because it builds that up really, really well. However, again, this movie is not all good. For one, like I mentioned before, the visual effects still are not the best. This movie still did rely on CGI and stuff, and just does not look that good here. I believe that there must be other ways to do these things, and our filmmakers really need to start looking for those other ways, because I feel like those would be more effective. Pacing this movie is also slightly off. The build-up does take kind of a while, and when the chase starts happening, the crazy stuff starts happening, it kind of gets tiring after a while, but it ends shortly after, so it's not that big of a problem. Also, EJ Falcon as an actor, he's just not as good as his female co-stars, and really I think his role really demanded like lots of emotion, and he doesn't necessarily bring that. And as good as I think the writing is, I still feel like the plot leaves something to be desired. It doesn't go all the way in showing us like how dire of a situation this is. It really does try to keep things like simple, a bit too simple. So it does kind of become straightforward in a bad sense, because this movie does have a lot of different things going on, emotional baggage and whatnot, the third eye aspect, and the movie doesn't really jump into all of that. So overall, Third Eye was just an okay movie. It had a really good premise and had really promising execution from a bunch of talented people. It's just that I thought the movie played it a bit too safe. I really think Third Eye would have benefited from being a bit more, challenging to its audience, a bit more violent, a bit more taboo, because the whole topic of cannibalism and whatnot, that's crazy, man. And this movie did deal with lots of heavy things. It just did not deal with those things well. However, I'm always optimistic for new concepts like these. I do think Third Eye is still worth checking out. I mean, relative to other horror movies in the Philippines. So, I don't know, but whatever you guys thought of Third Eye, if you saw it or not, I don't think anyone saw it. But if you do get a chance to see it, tell me what you think, whether you agree with me or disagree. Whatever you think, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.